All right, folks are streaming in. Thank you for joining us. We have just started. Going to give it like just 1 minute to let people trickle in, but I want to welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on this wonderful Wednesday. I hope everyone is having a fantastic and productive week. You are in for a treat. We have a great discussion up ahead. We have some fantastic panelists. These folks are the voices. They know. So we are going to have a wonderful discussion. So I'm just going to wait till like 1:02 and then we'll get started. All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Radia Barnes. I am the Diversity Partnerships Liaison here at Pride Global. And I just want to welcome everyone on behalf of my boss, Kamala Forbes. She's away on maternity leave, but she wishes she could be here with all of us. She's the Global Head of Diversity here. She's passionate about the subject that we'll be speaking about today. So I just wanted to make sure to welcome everyone. Say hello. You're in for a great treat. I'm going to turn it over to Kate, but listen, we are so excited to be talking about this subject. We're excited that all of you have decided to join us. So sit back, relax, have your questions ready. This is going to be a great hour. All right, Kate, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Radia. And of course, thank the panelists, but also all of you who have joined on our discussion today. I know many of you probably joined last year when we launched our first diversity-focused discussion with our suppliers in our MSP programs. Some of you may be new. And so last year, just to recap, last year we were really talking about diversity of candidates. Everyone who's on this call is in the staffing industry, and we're out there providing candidates to clients in PrideOne MSP programs. And we were kind of talking about how to tap into diverse communities in order to provide a diverse slate of candidates for the contingent roles. That was, I think, a really productive discussion, and it's an ongoing area of interest to our clients. Today, the focus is a little bit different. We're going to be talking about supplier diversity. Now, PrideOne and Pride Global, our parent company, is a diverse supplier. We are a certified minority Hispanic-owned business, and we know that being certified has really been a benefit to us, and has helped our clients achieve some of their diversity spend objectives. And a lot of you guys on the call, I know maybe not global companies having millions and billions of dollars in spend. So speaking for myself, PrideOne, prior to really getting pushed by our client, JPMorgan Chase, represented today by Nancy Minchillo. So thank you, Nancy. We were really pushed to start to look at our spend and not just sort of rest on the our own certification, but to start to push that down. And for us, it's been a great journey over the last year, a little bit year plus. And what it really comes down to is being thoughtful about choosing the companies that you're spending money with. In some cases, you don't have that much of a choice, but in some cases you do. And the overall goal, it's not just to check a box, it's really to enrich the communities that we serve or that we operate in by kind of spreading around the dollars that are coming in from our clients, and we're hoping going out to our own vendors, whether that be staffing vendors or suppliers of other goods and services. So we thought inviting Nancy, Lamont, and Darrol on to talk about their perspective on supplier diversity might help trigger some ideas with you guys and help to continue the conversation on this facet of diversity. And so I'll go kind of in the order that the speakers are on my screen, and allow them to introduce themselves and what they spend their days on and what they're passionate about. So for me, that's Nancy. Would you like to start?
Thank you, Kate. Yeah, hi, everybody. Thank you for joining and pleased to be here with my esteemed colleagues and with such a great company as Pride Global. So thank you for that. I'm Nancy Minchillo. I work with JP Morgan Chase in our Global Supplier Diversity program, but specifically in what we call community engagement. And community engagement is basically where we work with the national, regional, even local advocacy and certifying bodies for diverse businesses, and also with ethnic chambers of commerce, again, nationally, regionally, and locally, to support our efforts to engage diverse owned businesses for consideration into JP Morgan Chase's supply chain. And I've had the great honor to work with Lamont Robinson, who's on the call today too, in working with our gold suppliers. As Kate alluded, we initiated a program for our gold suppliers to establish their own supplier diversity initiatives over the course of the next few years. And it really comes down to what we call the multiplier effect, if you will. So, if we're all doing something and adding to the opportunities, then we do indeed experience the economic impact that we're all seeking, in our roles. So all that to say, happy to be here. Great discussion, I'm sure, because there are now so many, I think, creative ways that we can impact opportunities for diverse owned businesses to work with corporations like those of us on the call today. So thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. Lamont, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Kate, and also thanks, Nancy, for an introduction as well. So I'm Lamont Robinson. I'm the CEO and founder of Robinson LaRucco Consulting. Typically, our core competence is to help launch and expand supplier diversity programs for Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies. And so, I'm excited to be on this because when it comes to supplier diversity, my passion really comes from where I came from, where I grew up. I grew up on the west side of Chicago in a violent, drug-infested neighborhood. And even though the neighborhood was 100% African American, we didn't see any businesses that were owned by African Americans, at least legitimately. And so for that reason, it set me down a course where I discovered a TV show called The Jeffersons, which was the first time that I came across a business that was African American owned. I just didn't think that it was possible until that TV show. And so eventually my career led me down the path towards procurement and then supplier diversity. And so being able to understand what it's about, I'm excited to be on this panel because we'll talk about how supplier diversity could impact those communities. And many of you that are on this call, how you can contribute towards that, just like Nancy mentioned with the multiplier effect. That's what this is about. It's about reaching out to individuals like yourselves to help and to use the leverage that you have to support those communities through supplier diversity. So again, thanks for having me on, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Lamont. And then finally, Daryl Walker is also joining us. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, Daryl Walker. I am the Director of Supplier Diversity and Sustainability at AT&T, responsible for leading that piece of the organization, the role to ensure and maintain diverse suppliers, minority women, service-disabled veteran, LGBTQ-led businesses. In addition, I work to ensure 50% of our suppliers set their own science-based targets by 2024. Those are the things that kind of get them sticky with AT&T. With AT&T, it's about being thoughtful. It's about being intentional. It's about enrichment. All the things that the panel's been saying thus far, it's in direct alignment. I'm excited to be on the call as well to talk more about these things and move this forward. Thank you.
Thanks. And then also from the PrideOne side. So I want to introduce my esteemed colleagues, Lauren Winter and Miguel Simoes. Most of you on this call know one, if not both, of Lauren and Miguel, because you work with them or the programs that they help manage on a day-to-day basis. So I will let Lauren introduce herself.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Lauren Winter. I've been at Pride for going on 11 years. I am a program director here, and I manage the Pride Morgan Stanley relationship. So both on the IT side and on the non-IT side. So many of you guys on the phone are part of my program. And I'm happy to see that you've all joined, and just wanted to thank you in advance. And of course, thank you very much to our panelists. I very much appreciate your participation.
Okay, and Miguel, you want to say hello?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, so Miguel Simoes, and I report up to Goss. I'm the program director for PrideOne and responsible for the operations and delivery of our MSP relationships, both the client side and supplier side strategies. I work behind the scenes with the majority of the supplier partners that are on the call. But I've also had the privilege of working through this journey with JP Morgan Chase as part of their Gold Supplier Program, as Nancy had referred to earlier, in working to mature our supplier diversity strategy. So really looking forward to the conversation, sort of pushing down what we've learned from our interactions to our supplier partners. So thank you all for joining.
Thanks, Miguel. And Lauren, I think you have the information. I know we had asked the participants here to fill out a survey about where you're at in your supplier diversity journey.
Yeah.
So do you have that data?
So we didn't receive sort of a robust number of responses. So I will speak in sort of more in general terms. We did ask you guys to complete a survey. We received a few responses. We would ask that if you wouldn't mind at the end of this call or sometime in the next week or so, if you can fill out the survey, that would help us to sort of get a better idea of where you all stand as a program. But we did receive some responses. Different vendors are at different levels of where they are with their supplier diversity programs. Some of you have said you have a robust programs in place. Many of you indicated that you do have an individual on your site who is dedicated to supplier diversity. Some of you, a lot of that falls within your HR departments, you've indicated. Most of you do have some sort of tracking system, whether it's on Excel spreadsheets or it's a more mature system that helps you track your spend. A lot of you have said that your clients do require supplier diversity sort of candidate tracking and reporting. So you do that. Some I guess less. So again, if you can please fill out the survey, we would appreciate it to get more of to get more data. And as Kate mentioned, she did a great job of summing up. She did the job for me, but for this specific session, the focus is going to be on identifying diverse suppliers that we can engage with, right? And more importantly, identify the opportunities where we can consciously spend money with those diverse suppliers. So we're lucky to have our panelists here who are the subject matter experts to guide us in this topic. So Kate, I guess I bring it back to you.
Sure. Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, and we will be, here we go. I was gonna say we will be asking for a little bit of a spot survey here. If you guys can let us know about if you have a supplier diversity program. All right, we've got about half of you participating. Click those buttons, guys. Looks like we're trending about 2/3 indicating that they do have a program. Right, well, that's encouraging, actually. I would say, based on the supplier population that I'm aware of. There we go. So Rahdiah, I think, is steering on the polling. So yeah, you can see it's actually closer to 3/4 than 2/3. So that's great and encouraging. And so this content should be pretty relevant to you guys. I think that's the only question, Rahdiah, is that right?
We have one more.
Oh, okay. But later on, or?
Yeah, we could do it after your.
Okay, fine. I don't want to step on your. So yeah, so I thought we could start out about sort of what, when did supplier diversity come into play and what that evolution is. So Lamont, in your consultancy, I'm sure you're very familiar with what that's been like. So how would you describe the evolution of supplier diversity?
Sure. Thanks, Kate. And I always love talking about it because I think a lot of folks hadn't heard about it until 2020 and thinking that it was something that just started then, or even, in the 60s, in a sense. But I actually trace it back right after World War II. And so during those efforts, or during that situation, the larger businesses were able to support the war efforts, but the smaller businesses couldn't. What happened is Congress stepped up and established the Small Business Administration in 1953. And so the Small Business Administration allowed the youth to be able to help develop these small businesses so that if you had other war efforts, obviously we had subsequently, the smaller businesses were able to support those war efforts and have the economies of scale to support. But then in the 60s, during the Civil Rights era, in 1969, President Nixon signed an executive order that really mandated the usage of minority-owned businesses, as well as established the Minority Business Development Agency. And from that, you had organizations, diversity advocates that were spawned, such as the National Minority Supplier Development Council. Hold on one second, I heard my sound was off. Hopefully that's better. I get my external microphone on. So after the executive order was signed, you had the National Minority Supply Development Council was established, the Women's Business Enterprise National Council, and then other agencies that were allowing the ability to develop and promote and really match these diverse businesses to opportunities. So it went from something that was a mandate in the 60s and 70s, something that became more of a corporate responsibility in the 80s and 90s. Like you heard a lot of corporations saying we do it because it's the right thing to do. And then now it's an economic imperative, really driven because of the situation with, 2020. Not only, just the horrific situation that happened with George Floyd, but then also other events that led to it. And so now you have, the convergence of what happened with that and the generation Z that's coming in and basically saying, we won't even work or consider to work for your organization unless you're supporting our needs. And so now you have corporations that are stepping up, not just talking about it, really supporting it financially.
Great.
Great.
Yeah, really interesting.
Sorry, I'm just going to chime in, Lamont. Excellent points, but just for a frame of reference, so the National Minority Supplier Development Council, relative to the timeline, is celebrating 50 years this year. So just to give kind of a frame of reference around, to your point, it's been around for a while.
Yeah.
And I think we have the opportunity now, we kind of have a spotlight. And so we have the opportunity to really, be creative, get intentional, and do some really strategic work in this space.
Yeah, I wanted just to add in that space as well. A lot of people don't know that AT&T established this program in 1968. So it's 54 years for us in this space. We brought in tier 2 in 1989. So what I've jumped into is a legacy of service that AT&T has, and our team has grown in response to that. So there's a lot of good work being done.
Yeah, that's great to know. It's not a flavor of the month. This is something that's been around a long time and will continue to grow. So I guess maybe back to Lamont, because as you say, Darrell, your program is quite mature. Nancy, it probably JP Morgan Chase is probably predates you. I don't know, for the benefit of those folks, that 20% or so that don't have one or that are in the process of implementing it. What would you say? Where do you start? I mean, do you start with benchmarks and goals, or is that not the first step? How would you recommend a company get started with the Supplier Diversity program?
Yeah, so when we build programs for clients, especially those that never had any before, we always like to take a 4-phased approach, because it's important. Just like when you build a house, you need a solid infrastructure. So my thought is, you can't just go out there and just think that you're going to get to the level of JP Morgan Chase or AT&T day one. It takes work. And so that infrastructure is really about educating your top leaders, educating your middle managers about what supplier diversity is, talking about the business case for supplier diversity. We created something called, the 6 C's of supplier diversity, which really goes through the business case for why it's important. And so if you don't have that infrastructure to make sure that everybody is on the same page in terms of understanding what supplier diversity is, then you're going to struggle, or connecting every individual that is critical to your program to at least one of those C's to really understand, like, why is it important to them? Is it community based? Is it something that's based on competition? Is it something, that's based on cost? Just go through those cycles to really get a feel for what that is. And within that infrastructure phase, you're also looking at your own documents. Do you have documents, RFPs, contracts that really mandate the usage of diverse businesses, or at least strongly encourages the usage of diverse businesses? And so really that infrastructure phase is really what we like to get at first. And then from that, you go to the analytical phase. And so that's looking at your spend. And so how much do you currently spend? A lot of folks don't realize that they already purchase products and services from diverse businesses before they start out with diversity programs. And so hiring a third party to come in and really identify what that spend is. And then I know some organizations like to establish goals right away. And we discourage our clients from doing that, because what you want to do is to see what the reality is. You can put a goal out there of 10%, but if it's not realistic to your organization, then it's not going to happen. So again, my background is procurement. And so what we do is we work with clients and we say, look, let's look at and match up what your top areas of spend are, and then take out those ones that may be politically, sensitive at the moment and may take a little longer to do, because you need quick wins. When you get those quick wins politically and internally, you have an organization that's changing the culture and supporting your program internally. So you match that up with categories where you know that there are a lot of diverse businesses. And so obviously the staffing community is one for which, if you don't have a diverse supplier in staffing, then something is wrong. So looking at that, matching up, prioritizing the categories that you should go after first. And so after you do that phase, really that phase 3 is the strategic phase. You've already built that infrastructure. You've looked at your spend and see what that is. Now you're integrating that program into your culture. And so if you have employee resource groups, if you have other key internal groups, your senior leadership, they sometimes have councils. And so establishing your own supplier diversity council and integrating that program into the company culture. And then that last phase is the world-class phase. So this is where accountability comes into play, where you're establishing scorecards to make sure that you're measuring how your senior leaders are supporting your supplier diversity program, measuring how your suppliers are supporting your supplier diversity program, measuring the economic impact of your supplier diversity program. So again, obviously I'm leaving out a lot of steps within those 4 phases, but really it boils down to that. Build that infrastructure first so you can have a solid program to build on top of, find out what that analytical element of it is, and then build a program that's strategic.
Great, thanks. And so, for the on the corporate side, Darrell and Nancy, Lamont mentioned on senior leadership. So what would you say is the importance of senior leadership in the implementation or the running of a supplier diversity program?
It's incredibly important, both relative to the CEO, on throughout the entire organization. And the other thing I would suggest, to Lamont's point, and I've seen this, is a holistic approach as opposed to a fragmented approach. And I know, you feel like, well, you've got to start somewhere, and that's true, but you really need a comprehensive view, right? And you mentioned many of those, Lamont, of what, it's like a snapshot in time, right? Who are we doing business with? What do our customers want? What do we want? What aligns to our corporate values? A really holistic approach, including that executive sponsorship, but it's even sponsorship throughout the organization, the employee resource groups, your centers of excellence. It's throughout the organization. It takes time, but I think the holistic approach as opposed to that pragmatic or fragmented approach really works better. And Darrol, I'll certainly defer to you because you've seen this as well.
Yeah, for us, leadership is key, right? Because basically it doesn't make it a supplier diversity issue, it makes it a corporate issue. So when I'm talking to my sourcing managers, it's not me coming to them and telling them that they need to do, it's what we are doing. It's a part of our goal, and how do we drive this forward? Because we want ubiquitous representation. We want to look like the communities in which we serve. In order to do that, we need to have that top down. So it's so leadership knows, so that accountability, the stakeholder management, those are keys to understanding the why, and then just making a centric approach to suppliers, where there'd be the outreach, the development, the opportunity, advocacy, combining all of those things together. We're a little bit different here at AT&T. We sit right in procurement. So we're right where the opportunities are. We're the only organization as far as supplier diversity that advocates for diverse. So when you call the ivory tower, you will talk to one of the team. There's 16 of us, right? So I have commodity managers that happen. So we talk to everyone that applies in supplier diversity. There's no other, we don't do that for anyone else. So you have access in that space. So we take it seriously, and that's based on our leadership from Susan Johnson. That's based on John Stanky's approach to it as well. It really it's a top down, and then it's our job from that bottom up to kind of get everybody moving and create, like what Lamont said, that integration into the company culture.
And Darrol, that's a great point about where supplier diversity resides in a corporation.
Mm-hmm.
That is so key. The closer, and Lamont, you know this from your work as well, the closer you can be to whatever you call it, whether it's procurement or supply chain sourcing, wherever those decisions are made, the better.
Yeah. The
closer you can be, the more influence you can have, the opportunity to introduce diverse-owned businesses, just to be aware of, what is being purchased, what are we buying?
Yes.
All of that is so key. Great point.
Right. And what are the, I guess, so let's say a company they've gotten buy-in at the senior level, you've put together your infrastructure, and then what are the kind of the nuts and bolts at that point, like data, the data for your company. I know, speaking from Pride's perspective, all of you on the phone have surely received a survey from us asking you if you are diverse, and that sort of thing. So pulling that into some central places can be a challenge. So, what diversity metrics should be tracked? Is it important to track it granularly? Like, is it a woman-owned business? Is it a small business, veteran-owned? And are there some tools or anything that can help with that as companies get started in this process?
When I look at analytics for supplier diversity, I look at pretty much everything. I look at it in buckets, and so really you've got tier 1 and you've got tier 2. So from a tier 1 perspective, this is when you do business directly with diverse businesses. It's important to capture that, obviously, because that's what you can control. And so whatever you purchase in terms of products or services from diverse businesses, you need to understand that. And within that bucket, to your point, Kate, break that down. So it is important to understand what you do specifically with the various diversity classifications, not just minority owned, but if you can break it down to the ethnicity perspective as well. The reason why that's important is You may be in a situation where you're trying to either go after an opportunity or support a specific community. You've got to know those numbers. And so if you're meeting with a group of Hispanic communities or residents within the communities that you represent, you've got to know what your spend is with Hispanic-owned businesses. So that is important, just like it would be if you're meeting with the LGBTQ group. So understand that breakdown. So that's that one bucket, the tier one bucket. The tier two bucket is what your suppliers are doing with diverse businesses. That's important as well. You know, obviously, you don't have as much control over that as you would from a tier one or direct perspective, but it's still important because this gives you the opportunity to go out and try to get your suppliers to be able to support your efforts. And then there's another bucket that we talk about as well within my firm, and that's really going out to your, it's like the ancillary services. So like if you have credit cards or things like that, or if from a finance perspective, you may have, mergers and acquisitions. And so these allow opportunities for you to support efforts for investment. And so it's like, it doesn't really fit tier one or tier two necessarily because they may not come in from an accounts payable perspective, but it's still a very important bucket. So really those are the elements in terms of the buckets. So within that, supplier diversity spend is important. You also, once you get to the point of doing economic impact reports, the number of jobs created because of your supplier diversity program, that's going to be important. And I'll tell you another element that folks don't think about as much is we emphasize revenue generation for supplier diversity. So talk about the amount of revenues that have been generated because of your supplier diversity program. So to me, obviously Nancy and Daryl, because of the great work that both of those organizations have done, they'll be able to probably add some more. But really, I look at spend, I look at jobs creation, and I look at revenue generation.
Right. That's a great point. And Daryl, I was gonna toss it to you and say, with such a well-established program, does AT&T feel that it helps directly drive revenue or just build the brand? What would you say, that having a diverse supply base does to benefit you, not just cosmetically, but, as a business?
For us, we really want to impact the communities in which we serve. So that's the key thing for us as far as creating opportunities inside those communities where we have those opportunities, in that being job creation, in that being, so let's go back to Lamont's breakdown of tier one, tier two. Tier one, it's who we have direct, and we've been doing this for a while. We have that understanding. We have the data enrichment associated to that, which allows us to double click on the tier two. What are they doing in the communities that we could have an impact in and actually push that out? So we have, so that a spend that we have with them is actually reaching the communities based on our involvement with those partners. But we also look at their indirect, and what is indirect is what diverse businesses work with them that are not attached to our contract, but we want to see that they're supporting in that space. And that could be the landscaper, the equipment provider, whoever they're working with as diverse, and they get to receive those things. Associated to revenue enablement, AT&T holistically wants to make sure that we're just not giving, it's more so bringing in, and we like to align with partners that do the same thing. So there's a lot of government entities, there's a lot of companies that require certain percentages of supplier diversity, and we make sure that we provide that as well. So we're doing business with those that do business with us in a way that aligns with our mind share. So in effect, we are growing, we're increasing revenue enablement for supplier diversity in that space. They've won because of the supplier diversity elements that we placed inside of there. So that's a big thing that we'll be double clicking on, as well as looking at the impacts in which the suppliers that we have and what they do in the community and the communities in which they serve. What are they doing? What's their name? How are they doing it? We know you can do well. We know you can do your job, but how does your brand reach the community? We want to be a part of that. We want to foster that. We want to grow that. So it's all about community enrichment for us and making sure we're providing those opportunities to increase job creation.
That's great, Darrell. And you also, Kate, you also mentioned tools relative to data. Are there tools out there?
That's right.
To help you do that, to help you understand the data and tier one, tier two, et cetera, et cetera. And yes, there are. That's the good news. And Lamont, I know you've also seen many as Darrol has as well. So take advantage where you can of those tools so that you really do understand the data. You can share it, because that's the other part of all of this, is with that endorsement and with that sponsorship from your leaders and your stakeholders. They want to know, how are we doing? What kind of impact are we making? And so it's really exciting to really have, the metrics to demonstrate those efforts. There's lots of other ways to measure, but fundamentally, and I'll again defer to Lamont certainly about this, but it's you have to have a baseline. You've got to start somewhere. So I think, if you can fundamentally understand your spend as it is today relative to inclusion of diverse-owned businesses, that's a great place to start.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm completely on board with that, Nancy. And the thing about it is, don't try to do this alone if you could. While you're capable of doing it, there are experts out there, like Nancy mentioned, third-party organizations or companies that would identify that spend for you. So if you could invest in it, I mean, it is an investment. So it's impossible to say that you truly believe in it if you don't make an investment in it. So whether it's with resources or whether it's reaching out to third-party organizations.
Yeah, the only thing I would like to add to that whole thing is make sure that it ties in with your system. Do not put it on an island. You want to make sure you're tied into the system so everyone can see it. At the end of the day, if you create supplier diversity as a one-off, it will always be a one-off, and it needs to be an integration in order to create that culture.
That's exactly right, Darrol. And that's what I was referring to around that fragmentation. You really want to be holistic. And I know it seems like, oh my gosh, that's, such a big undertaking. And it is. But to Lamont's point, when you can garner the support, the technology, the infrastructure, all the things that you need, you can be successful, even if it's in a smaller scale. That's fine too, as long as you have all the right parts in place, all the right components to help you succeed.
Right. And so speaking of smaller scale, AT&T and JP Morgan Chase obviously are giant companies. And I think a lot of the perception is a lot of diverse suppliers, women-owned companies, and that sort of thing are going to be smaller in scope. And historically, the big companies want to contract with the big companies. So has that been a challenge for you? And how would you recommend, let's say if there are diverse suppliers on this call, how do they overcome some of those challenges?
So I think it's really around being an expert in your space, right? Regardless of size. You're right. It's human nature within large corporations to want to consider the larger household names, if you will. But to the extent that smaller, diverse-owned businesses can distinguish themselves within their particular category, if you will, of whatever it is they either, make or services they provide, et cetera. So my advice would be, be the best, be the SME for your particular offering, and ensure your portfolio is strong. And so regardless of size, there will be an opportunity. There will be, you might call it a niche. There will be the opportunity to engage.
Nancy, if I can, go ahead, Darrol.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, the thing I love about it as well is when diverse suppliers create a differentiator. Because the thing about it, when you look at an industry that's saturated with diverse businesses, such as staffing, what allows you to stand out? And it doesn't always have to be your core competence. It could be the way that you support diverse communities. It could be the way that the diversity breakdown of your organization. It could be just some of the events that you've co-hosted with diversity advocates. So separate yourself so that it doesn't seem like you're just an organization that is looking to benefit from supplier diversity. it's one thing about that, but then it's another thing about doing what Pride is doing right now, and that's practicing what you preach. So be a part of the supplier diversity community.
Yeah, I see there's a couple of avenues inside of there. One is, as what Nancy said, find one, pick one, grow that one, be that niche, be that SME inside that space. That's great. Also, what is your brand? How does it look inside the community? Because not only can you do the job, it allows me as the supplier diversity advocate to tug at heartstrings to actually propel you further. Not only do they do this, but they're also engaged in this, which it aligns with our views. So we need to operate in that space. But one thing I don't think a lot of people realize is we have a purview as far as AT&T and the larger companies have a purview into a lot of things. So we pick partners with our prime partners that align with our thought. So in some respects, we can help align that tier two in that one, in a find one, grow one, find a diverse business and grow the diverse business. But to Lamont and everyone's point, you have to be outstanding in that area in order to do that, for us to actually say, hey, Mr. Partner, pick this company and grow them inside this, grow this one inside there, create that tier two opportunity, because it's not just a pass through. It's something where we're looking to actually grow companies, and it's a sprint. It's a more of a marathon, not a sprint. So walk with us. We'll walk with you in there. We'll find the partners. If we can't do it, we know partners that are looking for things. But if you're good at what you do, and there's a niche that you have, and your impact statement is outstanding as far as what you do in the community, we'll support. We'll find something, and it's about timing. And everything that we do is on contract, so it's cyclical in that space. So build that relationship, find out what our pain points are in that space, so that we can set you up in a point where you can meet with that tier one, and that tier one can grow you into a tier one. There are opportunities for that.
Right, and I think you could flip that advice around to the topic of the day, which is, you as a buyer, each of you on the call,
Exactly.
Can be thinking about that as well, right?
Leverage what you have with the suppliers that you have in order to create those opportunities, and align with partners that basically align with your view, and you can push that we can create it here on this call. We can push this out. It will be a lot more pervasive.
Right. Okay. And Lamont, how do you create accountability? Yeah, I know you mentioned that in the beginning, but you and the other panelists. So you've got the program. You've maybe been able to identify your spend, identify how much of that spend is something that is on the table to look at, as opposed to like you said, things that might be politically touchy or might not be politics. It might just be practicality. Everybody on the call probably pays for LinkedIn. You probably pay for Career Builder. There's not as many options there, right? But you've figured out what spend you can address. How do you put accountability in place to make sure that it moves out of theoretical and into reality?
Yeah, no, great question, Kate. First off, as an organization, I know I mentioned in the beginning, don't set goals, but eventually you have to get to the point where you do, after you've been able to evaluate where your spend is and where the opportunities are, establish realistic, but goals that will stretch you. So not goals that you're going to check off. So as an organization, I think that's where the accountability comes. But then internally as well, among your senior leaders, establish scorecards. And so those scorecards would allow them to see where they measure up in terms of the support of your supplier diversity program. Now, the caveat to that is not every function is going to have an ability to be able to purchase products. You have some functions that are just supportive. And so there may not be an impact that they can provide in terms of spend, but there are other ways that they can provide, in terms of helping to go out to an event and help educate diverse businesses that you do business with, or be a part of your council, attend things with the supplier diversity group. There are ways that they can support that. So within those scorecards, in addition to showing them where they are in terms of spend, if they do have an opportunity, to show them, give them advice in terms of how they can better support the program. And then externally, you can build scorecards also for your suppliers. So look at your top suppliers and show them where they've been able to support your efforts through tier 2 or other measures as well. So again, just establish goals for yourself, establish goals for your leaders, establish goals for your suppliers.
Great.
Yeah, that is excellent advice. And the other thing I think that is important is, you want to be realistic about those, but at the same time, don't just go for green, right? Don't play it too safe, I guess I'm suggesting. I mean, nobody likes amber or red, but and this is advice I've received over the years. It's not necessarily my own, but I agree with it. So I guess that's why I'm sharing it. It's okay to push the envelope, right? And to be creative. And green isn't all, yeah, green's great. We all want to be green on a dashboard, right? Or a scorecard or whatever. But also it's the effort, it's the attempt, it's the intention, right? And I know that gets a little fuzzy, and how do we measure that and all that good stuff. And Darrell, you probably have some experience with that as well, because then you get into the subjective. Although Lamont, you did actually provide some good examples. And we're actually doing that at JP Morgan Chase as well for some of our executives who are in positions that they don't buy stuff, right? They don't. And so how can they participate? How can they be involved? How can they contribute? So you can get creative with that too.
I would agree with that. I utilize those to create those ambassadors or champions of the business, get them engaged, and then utilize each other as far as horse trading between the groups. Because if you see someone that's doing well, let's lift them all up holistically, and we can grow them as a unit.
Right. And Nancy, since you mentioned you do partner with a lot of these organizations, NMSDC and others, you might be in a good position to make some recommendations of how do buyers go out and find potential suppliers in categories where they feel like there's opportunity.
So that's a great question, and it's a great opportunity really to find diverse-owned businesses. And all of the certifying bodies, have some sort of database, right? Now, it does include and involve membership. So, and Lamont mentioned this earlier, you have to have a budget. You have to have some money to invest in the technology and the tools and the memberships to these organizations. But what we found successful is, yes, membership at the national level, but in some regards, deeper involvement more with the regional affiliates. And that way you are then getting access to, in some cases can be even be face to face. You can meet literally, in your specific city with these businesses. So I advocate for working with the regional and local affiliates where you can, because then you do have a better opportunity to actually do some one-on-one in-person type meetings, whether it's, matchmakers or just, in a particular event that one of the regional affiliates is hosting. Those types of activities, I think, are very beneficial. It may not be immediate. That's the other thing. There can be a relatively long runway with some of this, but that's okay because you've made that initial contact. So I think that's been very beneficial. The other thing that I think we do, and we can probably do a better job of, is, and Darrell, you alluded to this, is introducing and referring diverse-owned businesses to our so-called prime, or for JP Morgan Chase, our gold suppliers. And I think that's beneficial too. And again, it may not be an immediate opportunity, but it's another connection. It's another potential to engage with the diverse-owned business.
If I can just add in there as well, Google also, if you don't have the ability at this moment to join, any of those groups or invest in sourcing tools, which third-party groups do have for you to purchase, so you can find diverse suppliers. You know, some trick that I use is just going on and if you're looking at a specific category, type in that category and type in right after that minority owned or woman owned. And sometimes that'll pop up too, and you'll be able to find diverse businesses that way as well. So it's a simple way of doing it. It's, you know, it's limited versus investing in a tool. But if you don't have anything today and you wanted to try to find, it's a quicker way of being able to do that.
Yeah, the networking internally with your other advocates in this space helps out tremendously as well. But to Nancy's point, you do need a budget, and Lamont, you need a budget around, I would say pick the top 5, you know, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the Pan Asian, you know, the women-owned business, Black chambers and MSCC. You can start there, but you're going to need around 10 to 12,000 around that. But if you don't have that, there's a lot of people that I've seen, and there's a lot of suppliers that are large that actually go with the government and they utilize small business inside that space. It's not picking up a lot, but there's some granularities that we need to see inside there, because there's a lot of minorities inside the small business space. But that's another avenue people take as far as where they're going to start looking at diverse suppliers in that space, and how their company holistically looks at supplier diversity. Are you only going to look at the top core, or are you going to add small business? And then if you do, how does it look? So there's a lot of avenues to take.
Right. Well, thanks. I think that's some great advice for the people listening. We've got the second question up about whether the DEI strategy, which typically refers to your own workforce, and linking with supplier diversity. And it looks like mostly the answer is that folks are not, but we'll let that run a minute for people to click in and give us their answer to that. And then I think with less than 10 minutes left, I think I'd like to open it up in case, I know I saw one hand go up. And so in case anybody has any questions. So,
you know, just
go ahead.
To summarize, it's just something, not to summarize, but to focus on, to build a supplier diversity program holistically, right? You need a front door process, you need internal stakeholders, you need to approach your major suppliers, and you need to put in money associated to those programs we talked about there. That gets you there, but it's a crawl, not a, it's crawl, walk, run. So you focus on the big contracts and you make that happen, and you kind of do it's data enrichment, it's looking at your bottom line, but it's, can you absorb the suppliers that you have, and can you triage through them? Does your leadership believe in them as well? And can you ask those same individuals, those same contractors, make opportunities for other folks?
Mm-hmm.
Then if you can do that, you can grow the program.
That's right. So I think that's a good way to look at it holistically. So Darrell, thank you for that. So I don't know if it's possible to unmute. I know Jim put a question, raised a hand, and I don't know if there's any more in the chat, but can we hear from Jim, or does he need to type?
Jim, if you can unmute yourself, feel free to go ahead and ask your question.
Still here.
If anyone has a question, feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask. We have about 6 minutes left.
I'm encouraged to see with both supplier diversity and with the DEI question that it's in the works. I mean, that's encouraging, right? Because that means that it's in, you know, the discussion. It's out there. We're talking about it, right? We're hopefully, you know, making some plans, looking at budget. I think that both of those responses are very encouraging.
You know, I look at the DEI strategy more as a conversation piece that you have with at a leadership level, as far as does your organization look like the communities in which you serve, and if not, why not, or have those conversations as to where they're going. It's a great conversation starter, so you can align with the business.
You know, if you just add in there, you know, the thing that we're starting to see is we're starting to see competing interests. And so supplier diversity is now competing against sustainability, is competing against human rights. And so from that perspective, we want, as professionals, supplier diversity professionals with myself, Darrol, and Nancy, our job is to make sure we continue to advocate on behalf of supplier diversity, that is not thrown out there in places. I think Darrol mentioned earlier, on an island somewhere. And, you know, it's a nice thing, you know, let's put a bow on top of it and set it aside. If you truly want to be impactful in this space, you got to be in it. You've got the NMSDC conference coming up at the end of October, beginning of November in New Orleans. And that's a great way to be able to connect with other supplier diversity professionals so that you could, as Darrol mentioned again earlier, you could build out, you know, that networking and to get to know who those professionals are, especially in your industry, so that you can ask those questions in terms of how to build out supplier diversity strategy. But yeah, it's you know, it's an opportunity for you to do something special and impactful, and work with us in making sure that it's not just thrown out there and forgotten.
The only other thing that I'm seeing that's grumbling in Lamont, and Nancy, you might have some additional information on as well. ESG, environmental social governance. It's becoming the talk track. It's overshadowing supplier diversity. It's overshadowing but all it is the umbrella.
Right.
We're all up under that. So we're going to get a new name. So you might hear that over and over again, but supplier diversity is still strong. Sustainability is still strong. Those are umbrellas under ESG. Great point.
You know, and within Darrol, within that bucket, the ESG bucket, so you got environmental, social, and governance. The way that we always look at it is supplier diversity is perfectly positioned in that social element. So the S of ESG. Yep. Because really the essence of it is building communities. And so as long as we, to your point, because I think that umbrella is going to get even bigger. And I think ESG will dominate more, especially globally, because, you know, you speak, countries speak ESG more than they speak diversity. And so because of that, then let's ride the wave and try to bring supplier diversity more under that social bucket, take advantage of the platform, but make sure that it's separated in terms of the message.
That's exactly right.
That's right. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up because funny, I've been in 2 meetings in the last 2 days that have brought up ESG. And I'm like, I guess this is the hot new thing.
That's the new. Right.
But anyway, we have 2 minutes left. I wanted to make sure I had an opportunity to toss it over to Miguel to kind of give his thoughts and wrap it up.
Yeah, and thank you, Kate, and thank you all to our panel speakers for taking the time for sharing their experiences and insight. I feel like we've touched on some really great points today and hope everyone found it as informative as I did. I think it's important that we continue this conversation, right, and hear about, you know, how our supplier partners, they've reflected on today's conversation, hear about real life examples on what you've accomplished to improve from your current state and how you've overcome some of the challenges that we've reviewed today. As I think about it, right, and the folks that are on the call, right, from the supplier side, right, we share in a common denominator, and that we're all in the same industry, right? We're not manufacturing and selling widgets. We're in the people business, right? So we fully understand that at first glance, you know, finding large pockets of addressable spend can seem to be a challenge within our space. But I could tell you from firsthand experience that with the help of the individuals that you heard from today on this call, that there are ways to make strides and contribute towards these efforts. And the real opportunity, it sits with us, right? The people on this call to go back, you know, be accountable, right? Look with fresh eyes at ways that you can make improvements at the organizational level. And if we could accomplish that, then the multiplier effect comes into play and we all start to see small victories. And by no means am I suggesting that PrideOne has found the secret sauce, right? Because there's still a lot of work for us to do. But we've matured quite a bit over these last 18 months with the help of Nancy and Lamont here. So we'd love to share our shortfalls and wins with you to help in your journey. So, you know, please use us as a resource. You know, I'd like to point out that, as Lauren had mentioned earlier, we will be circulating the survey around again after the session. We'd love for everyone to participate, not just with responses to sort of the programs that you have in place and the different levels of maturity, but more so to share feedback and comments and thoughts, right? It's important as we continue with these sessions to improve on them, to align with what you're expecting out of them. And again, thank you for everyone taking the time. Thank you to our supplier partners for your continued support and efforts, and huge shout out and thank you to our panelists for sharing so much rich content with us. So very appreciative of it. Thank you guys.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining us. Have a good afternoon.
You too. Bye-bye.